My name is Gabrielle Palmer. I'm 35 years old, an architect by trade, and a believer by heart. Not in fairy tales, but in structure, in foundations that don't crack when life shakes them. That's how I approach love too: blueprints, plans, effort. You build something lasting one brick at a time. For the past year, I thought my fiancé Isaac Miller and I were doing just that, building. Our wedding was 3 months away. The venue was booked, deposits paid mostly by me. His mother had her dress ready. My sister had chosen hers. Everything was lining up just like a good design. Until one night at dinner, it all caved in. It was supposed to be a celebration, a 3-month countdown dinner with his parents, and oddly one extra guest, Daniela Ruiz, his ex. Isaac always called her my best friend. They dated in college, ended years ago, but she somehow never left the picture. She was at birthdays, family barbecues, even his niece's christening. She's like family, he said, and I foolishly believed that. That night, the restaurant felt warm and golden. Laughter bounced between the wine glasses, his mother telling stories about Isaac's baby photos. Isaac squeezed my hand under the table. "To new beginnings," he said, raising his glass. I smiled. Then, with that same dazzling smile he used when pitching his ideas to anyone who'd listen, he stood up and clinked his glass. "I have a surprise," he announced. "I've finally chosen our maid of honor." I thought our maid of honor. We had discussed this. My best friend Naomi was supposed to fill that role. Isaac beamed. "I wanted someone who represents family for both of us. Someone who's always been there." He turned to Daniela. "So I asked Danny to be our maid of honor, and she said yes." Applause. Genuine, joyful, oblivious applause. His parents cheered. Danny blushed and placed her hand over his. And I froze, fork halfway to my mouth. My world didn't explode, it narrowed. To him. To her hand on his. To the realization that in his story I was a supporting character. Isaac grinned at me, expecting tears or gratitude, maybe both. Instead, I smiled faintly, just enough to hide the tremor in my chest. "Wow," I said. He laughed, mistaking my word for delight. "I know, right? It's perfect." But what he didn't know, what none of them knew, was that inside something cold and exact was clicking into place. The same clarity I feel when a blueprint fails inspection, the structure's unsound. You don't patch it, you tear it down. Dinner carried on, a blur of chatter and clinking cutlery. Danny told stories about her and Isaac's old adventures. His parents adored it. I sat there smiling when expected, nodding at the right beats, memorizing the moment. When dessert came, Isaac leaned toward me. "You're quiet," he whispered. "Just thinking," I replied softly. "About what?" "About how some surprises rebuild things," I said, still smiling, "and some expose the cracks." He chuckled, not understanding. He never did. Later, as we left the restaurant, Danny waved goodbye to us both, her arms still looped around Isaac's, for a little too long. He looked down at her, grinning like an old movie star. And I just watched them from the corner of my eye, calm, detached. Because the thing about being a builder is, when you see a crack forming, you already know whether the structure will stand or fall. And that night, I finally saw the truth. The foundation was rotten, and I was done pretending it wasn't. "Wow," I whispered again, this time to myself. But what I meant was, game on. The next morning, I woke up before Isaac. The light filtered through our bedroom curtains, warm, harmless, ordinary. It didn't match the silence in my chest. He was still asleep beside me, his face peaceful, his arms sprawled across the bed like he owned every inch of it. Maybe he did. I'd given him everything: my time, my patience, my trust. All the things I thought mattered most. But not anymore. I slipped quietly out of bed, careful not to wake him. My steps were steady, purposeful. The architect in me had taken over again. On my laptop sat the wedding master file, our shared spreadsheet. Every detail lived there: vendors, budgets, deposits, timelines. I had built it cell by cell, the way other people build dreams. I clicked it open and began to dismantle it. First, an email to the Sterling Ballroom, our venue. Subject: event update. Confirmation, number 78950. Dear Ms. Albright, I'm writing to inform you of a change to our scheduled event. The wedding ceremony of Gabrielle Palmer and Isaac Miller will no longer take place. Instead, I'll be hosting a small family appreciation dinner on the same date and time. The guest list has been revised from 150 to 70. Please remove Isaac Miller as a point of contact. Kindly send an updated invoice reflecting the reduction in headcount. Regards, Gabrielle Palmer. I copied the tone of a business letter. Polite, professional, distant. The kind of tone that kills quietly. Then I moved on caterer, photographer, band. Same message. Event reclassification. Updated guest list. Please process refund. Each email I sent was a small exhale. By the time Isaac stirred awake, I was on my third cup of coffee. Morning, he said, rubbing his eyes. You're up early. Couldn't sleep, I murmured, closing my laptop. He kissed my forehead. Big day. I'm meeting Danny for coffee to talk about wedding plans. Of course you are, I said, smiling thinly. He didn't notice the tremor behind it. He left humming to himself. And just like that, I had the apartment and my freedom to myself. For 2 days, he was blissfully unaware. He kept talking about floral arrangements and color palettes, while I quietly erased every trace of our future together. Then, on Saturday afternoon, the phone rang. The name flashing on the screen made me pause Sterling Ballroom. I handed the phone to him. It's for you. He answered cheerfully. Hey, Ms. Albright. Yes, this is Isaac. Then came silence. His face changed. Confusion. Then disbelief. Then anger. What cancellation clause, he snapped. What do you mean her portion of the event? He shot me a look, eyes wide with panic. There must be some mistake. The color drained from his face as the woman kept talking. When he hung up, his voice was barely steady. What did you do, Gabrielle? I didn't look up from the book I was reading. I made some updates. Updates. You cut the guest list in half. You removed my name. The venue thinks I'm canceled out. I closed the book slowly. Oh, I see the problem. You think this is funny, he barked. Not at all, I said calmly. You made a decision about my wedding party. I made a decision about our event. We're even. He stared at me, blinking hard. You're ruining everything over a misunderstanding. It wasn't a misunderstanding, I said. It was a message, loud and clear. You announced your ex as my maid of honor, Isaac, without asking. That wasn't a mistake. That was a proclamation. He threw his hands up. You're being insecure, Gabrielle. Danny is family. If you loved me, you'd understand that. I tilted my head slightly. If you respected me, you wouldn't test that love. For a moment, he said nothing. The silence stretched heavy, brittle. Finally, he muttered, You've lost it, and stormed toward the door. I didn't follow him. I didn't cry. I just sat there, tracing the rim of my coffee cup with my thumb. Because deep down, I wasn't broken. I was awake. He thought my wow was surrender. But this was the beginning of demolition. And I've always been very good at taking things apart, brick by brick. Isaac didn't come home that night, or the night after. He sent one text that read, Need space. You're overreacting. Talk when you've cooled off. I didn't reply. Because when someone tells you that your pain is an overreaction, they're not asking for space. They're asking for control. 2 days later, I found him in the kitchen, sitting on the counter, eating cereal like nothing had happened. The sight of him relaxed, careless, made something in me twist. So he said between bites, We're going to talk now, right? Sure, I said evenly. Let's talk. He smirked. You're mad about Danny, I get it. But this whole cancellation stunt, it's childish. I leaned against the counter opposite him, arms folded. Childish is making life-changing decisions during dessert. He rolled his eyes. Oh, come on. You're acting like I cheated. Did you? That made him flinch not because of guilt, but because I asked without emotion. He laughed, but it was hollow. You really don't trust me, do you? I took a breath. I trusted you completely, Isaac, until you made me watch you call your ex-family while holding her hand at our engagement dinner. He slammed his bowl into the sink. You're twisting it. It was symbolic. Symbolic of what I said quietly. Of the three of us. He stared at me. God, you sound paranoid. That word paranoid hit harder than any shout. He turned away, muttering, You're making something out of nothing. I followed him into the living room. Nothing. You've kept Danny in your life like an emotional safety net. Every time you needed validation, she was there. Every time I questioned it, you called me insecure. That's not true, he snapped. She's just my friend. You knew that from the start. I nodded slowly. Yes, I did. I also knew you still keep a photo of her in your desk drawer. I found it when I was organizing your documents last month. He froze. Sunset photo. She's wearing your old college sweatshirt. You remember it, don't you? He didn't deny it. He didn't have to. You should have told me, I said softly, because love doesn't hide in drawers. He looked at me, then not angry, just cornered. You're impossible to please. Nothing I do is enough. That's the problem, I said. You think love is about doing just enough to keep someone from leaving. Silence filled the room. Heavy, unforgiving. Finally, he said, So what, you're breaking up with me over this? I looked at him for a long time before answering. I'm breaking up with the illusion that we were equals. He laughed again, short, sharp. You're being dramatic. Maybe I said walking toward the door, but at least I'm not being dishonest. He followed me. Where are you going? To think. About what? About whether it's worth rebuilding something that keeps cracking in the same place. I left before he could reply. Outside, the air was cold, clean, like the first inhale after a storm. I walked without destination, replaying everything in my head, his laughter with Danny, her hand brushing his, the smug look she gave me across the table. That's when the truth hit me. It wasn't Danny I was angry at. It was me. Because I'd seen all the red flags months ago, the late-night texts, the old friends' dinners he forgot to mention until the next day, the way she always managed to show up when we fought. And each time I had chosen peace over confrontation, love over logic. But love built on denial is a structure waiting to fall. As I walked past the glass front of a cafe, my reflection caught my eye. I barely recognized the woman looking back, calm, composed, but hollow. And for the first time, I admitted it out loud, quietly, to no one I deserve better than to be an accessory in someone else's story. When I got home that night, Isaac wasn't there. I didn't care. I poured myself a glass of wine, opened my laptop, and looked at the line of emails I'd sent to the vendors. Each one was a doorway closing. I stared at the screen, and for the first time since dinner, I smiled, not out of bitterness, but out of clarity. He thought silence meant surrender. But silence, real silence, is just strategy. And mine had just begun. By the end of that week, the story had spread faster than any email I'd sent. It started small. Isaac's mother, calling, her voice dripping with carefully measured concern. "Sweetheart, what's this nonsense about canceling the wedding?" I kept my voice calm. "It's not nonsense, it's a decision." A decision, she echoed, scandalized. "You're humiliating Isaac? Do you have any idea what people are saying?" "I don't," I said. "And I don't care." She gasped, like I'd just confessed a crime. "After all we've done to welcome you into the family." "You made me feel welcome," I interrupted gently until I stopped playing along. The line went silent, then she hung up. That was strike one. Strike two came on social media. Photos of Isaac and Danny laughing over coffee appeared on her page captioned, "When your best friend keeps you sane through the chaos." The comments were brutal, mostly from his side. "She's so dramatic. Poor Isaac dodged a bullet. Gabrielle was always too uptight anyway." It was the oldest trick in the book, make the woman who walks away look like the villain. But what they didn't realize was that villains don't offer refunds. That night I opened my email again, this time a new draft. Subject: wedding cancellation. Gabrielle Palmer and Isaac Miller. Dear friends and family, it's with a heavy heart that I inform you that our wedding will no longer take place. This decision stems from differences in what partnership and mutual respect mean to each of us. I want to thank you all for your love and support and sincerely apologize for any inconvenience this may cause. If you've made non-refundable arrangements, please contact me directly. I'll ensure you're reimbursed in full. With gratitude, Gabrielle Palmer. No dramatics, no blame, just clarity. I hit send all and waited. The next day my phone exploded, but not with anger, with compassion. My sister texted first. "Finally, I'm proud of you." Then my best friend Naomi. "Everyone's on your side. You handled it perfectly." Even my boss, who barely knew me outside work, sent. That email was classy. Takes guts to stay graceful under fire. Meanwhile, Isaac's phone wasn't so lucky. I heard later from a mutual friend that his Groomzilla story, the one he and Danny had been peddling to, everyone didn't hold up. People started asking questions. If I was so controlling, why would I be the one refunding guests? If I was unstable, why was my message calm, respectful, professional? The narrative cracked, just like our foundation had. Danny tried to patch it online with another post. "Sometimes people can't handle strong friendships." And I replied, not publicly, but quietly, through my lawyer. Because among the many expenses I had covered, there were 3 big ones his parents had promised to reimburse her dress, the rehearsal dinner, and the floral deposit, all paid on my card. It wasn't petty, it was practical. The letter went out that Friday, drafted cleanly and without emotion. To the Miller family, please find attached an itemized statement of wedding-related expenses fronted on your behalf. As the event is no longer taking place, reimbursement in the total amount of $13,500 is requested within 30 business days. Respectfully, Gabrielle Palmer. I didn't have to say a word about morality. The numbers spoke for themselves. That evening, I received a text from Isaac. "Really, Gabrielle, a lawyer? You've lost it." I stared at the message for a long time, then typed, "No, Isaac, I finally found it," my spine. Then I blocked his number. Silence again. My kind of silence. Not the weak kind. The deliberate kind. The kind that makes noise by what it refuses to say. A week passed. The public sympathy turned toward me quietly, steadily. Danny stopped posting. Isaac disappeared from social media. And in that silence, my phone buzzed one more time. It was from the Sterling Ballroom coordinator, the same woman who'd called him days earlier. "Hi, Gabrielle, just wanted to say I've seen a lot of wedding cancellations, but never one handled this gracefully. You did the right thing." I smiled at the screen, surprised by how much that meant. Because sometimes validation doesn't come from the people who loved you. It comes from the people who saw the mess and recognized how neatly you walked away from it. That night, I poured myself a glass of wine and stood by the window. Outside, the city glowed soft, indifferent, alive. I whispered to my reflection, they wanted chaos. A pause. I gave them closure. And I meant every word. It didn't take long for consequences to find Isaac. They always do, especially when someone believes they're untouchable. The first hit came from the venue. They called him again, politely reminding him that his name was no longer on the contract. The refund would be processed to my card. He must have realized in that moment how little control he had left. The second hit came from the caterer. They asked if he wanted to book a separate event since his fiancé's appreciation dinner was now fully paid. He didn't. Of course he didn't. When his mother phoned me again this time, trembling with anger, she spat. "You're humiliating us. Do you know how people are talking about our family?" I kept my tone polite. "I imagine they're talking about how your son's ex became his maid of honor." "That's quite a headline." She went silent. I could almost hear her swallow the truth. That was when I understood something I hadn't before. People like them fear embarrassment more than they fear being wrong. And my quiet dignity had embarrassed them more than any shouting ever could. A week later, my lawyer received a voicemail from Isaac's father, furious, condescending, demanding that we drop the repayment nonsense. My lawyer forwarded it to me with a note. "Classic bluff. Don't respond. They'll pay." He was right. 10 days later, a check arrived by courier. $13,500. Every cent. That's when the tone changed. Now Isaac wasn't angry. He was remorseful. Or rather, he was pretending to be. He showed up at my apartment one afternoon, uninvited, holding a bouquet of wilted lilies, my least favorite flowers. "Gabrielle, please," he started, voice soft, pleading. "Can we talk?" I didn't move from the doorway. "About what?" "About us," he said. "I miss you. I've realized how stupid I was. Danny's gone. She doesn't mean anything." "Then why are you still wearing the watch she gave you?" I asked quietly. He froze, looking down at his wrist like it had betrayed him. "I just forgot," he said lamely. "No," I replied, calm as glass. "You never forget what you still value." He tried again. "I'll prove it, Gabrielle. I'll make things right. We can still do the courthouse wedding, just you and me." I smiled faintly. "You think I want a smaller version of the same mistake?" "Gabby, please," he said, stepping closer. "We were good together." "Until you brought her back into our story," I said. "You didn't just disrespect me, Isaac. You disrespected what marriage means." He looked genuinely lost now, like a child realizing the game was over. "Can't we just start over?" I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small folded napkin. It had our old wedding monogram printed on it, G and I. But there, right in the middle, in ink that would never fade, was a third letter, a crooked D. I still remembered the moment it happened, that dinner with Danny. The smirk on her lips as she took a pen and drew it. "Now it's perfect," she'd said, giggling. "G-I-D, the whole family." Isaac had laughed. Now I held it up in front of him. "This," I said, "isn't a keepsake. It's a warning sign I ignored." He went pale. "You kept that?" "Yes," I said, "because it reminded me of the moment I realized we weren't partners. We were a triangle. And I don't build triangles, Isaac. I build foundations." He tried one last time. "You're really not forgiving me." "I already did," I said softly. "I forgave you the day I stopped needing your apology." His lips parted, no words came out. I stepped back, opening the door wider. "Your things are in boxes in the spare room. My brother will be here tomorrow when you pick them up." "Gabby, please." I closed the door. His voice muffled behind it. "You'll regret this." I leaned against the wood, listening until his footsteps faded. My heart didn't race. My hands didn't shake. Just a quiet, liberating calm. Because for the first time in months, I wasn't waiting for someone to choose me. I had already chosen myself. That night, I sat by the window, city lights flickering below. On the table beside me, the folded napkin sat next to the $13,500 check. One symbolized everything fake about our love, the other everything real about my independence. And as I looked between them, I finally understood closure doesn't come when they apologize. It comes when you no longer need them to. It's strange how silence becomes a habit. For weeks after I closed that door, I didn't check his social media, didn't ask mutual friends about him, didn't even say his name out loud. I filled my days with work site visits, design revisions, the kind of order that made sense in ways people no longer did. Then one evening, about a month later, the silence cracked again. A knock on my door. Not a pounding, just two quiet knocks. Predictable, hesitant. When I opened it, Isaac stood there, thinner, paler, a bouquet of white roses in his hand. He had learned something, at least. They were my favorite flowers. He looked nothing like the man who'd once declared his ex would be my maid of honor. His eyes were hollow, almost frightened. "Gabrielle," he said, voice low, "I needed to see you." I didn't invite him in. I just leaned against the door frame. I thought we said everything we needed to say. "Please," he whispered, "just listen." I sighed, stepped aside, and motioned him in. He set the flowers on the counter like an offering to a god he no longer believed in. "I ended things with Danny," he said quickly. "You were right. About everything. I was stupid, arrogant. I thought you'd always wait." I didn't reply. He kept talking. "I can fix this, Gabrielle. I'll call the vendors. We don't need the big wedding, just us, a small ceremony. We can start over." He was trembling slightly, not from cold, but from fear. Not of losing me, but of losing the life he'd planned with me. I looked at him, really looked. For the first time, I didn't see the man I loved. I saw a pattern I had finally broken. "Isaac," I said softly, "I believe you when you say you ended things with her. I even believe you're sorry, but you're not sorry for what you did. You're sorry for what it cost you." He blinked confused. "That's not true. I miss you." "No, I said you miss being the hero of the story, and I stopped being your audience." He frowned, his voice rising. "Why are you doing this? We were supposed to get married." "That's the thing," I said quietly. "You wanted a wedding. I wanted a marriage." He froze, and for a moment I saw the old Isaac, the one who smiled, easily charmed everyone believed sincerity could cover selfishness. He took a step closer. "I can change." I reached into the drawer beside me and pulled out that same napkin, our monogram. G and I, with Danny's crooked D scrawled in the middle. I unfolded it slowly, smoothing its edges flat on the counter between us. This, I said, was the moment I realized who we were. Not partners, not equals, just a performance for the people watching. He stared at it. "You're still holding on to that?" "Yes," I said, "because every time I look at it, I remember the sound of you laughing while she made a mockery of our future." His shoulders sagged. "It was a joke, Gabrielle. It was a message I corrected, and I finally got it." I handed the napkin to him. "Keep it. It's yours. You and Danny built it together." He didn't take it. He just stared down, speechless. "I've packed the rest of your things," I said quietly. "They're in boxes in the spare room. My brother will be here tomorrow while you pick them up." He lifted his eyes. There were tears there, the first real ones I'd ever seen from him. "Gabrielle, please, don't do this." I smiled faintly. I already did. He tried again. "We can still—" "I hope you find peace," I said, cutting him off. And before he could speak again, I opened the door. He stood there for a second, lost, small, almost childlike. Then he whispered, "You'll regret this someday." I tilted my head slightly. "No, Isaac. I regret staying as long as I did." He hesitated, then left. When the door clicked shut behind him, the silence that followed wasn't heavy anymore. It was pure, clean. I sat down on the couch, the faint scent of white roses still in the air. For the first time in years, I didn't feel angry, or sad, or vindicated. I just felt free. Because closure doesn't always come from dramatic goodbyes. Sometimes it comes from the sound of a door closing and staying closed. 6 months later, my life looked nothing like the one I'd planned, and that was the best part. The apartment was brighter now, not because I redecorated, but because peace has a way of lighting up a room more than any lamp ever could. Work was steady. Clients respected me. I slept through the night again. And every morning, I'd make coffee, open the balcony doors, and breathe not to forget him, but to remind myself that I survived him. Then one morning, an email arrived from my lawyer. Subject: Ree Miller family case closed. Payment confirmed. File archived. The check had cleared weeks ago, every cent repaid. The chapter officially closed. I stared at that email for a long time, then archived it too. The sound the folder made when it disappeared was the sweetest click I'd ever heard. But closure has a way of echoing back. A mutual friend sent me a message later that month. "You won't believe this, Isaac and Danny broke up. Apparently their meant-to-be love story didn't survive real life. Without me as their shared villain, there was nothing to bond over. Isaac's charm faded when bills came due. Danny's patience cracked when she realized attention doesn't pay rent. He moved back in with his parents. She went on a social media spree, posting captions like, 'Some people destroy love just to feel powerful.' I didn't respond. I didn't even screenshot it, because true revenge isn't loud. It doesn't need proof. It's the quiet that follows when they realize you're not even looking back." On the 6-month mark, the date that should have been our wedding day, I booked a solo trip. No destination tied to memories. Just somewhere new. Somewhere mine. I spent mornings hiking, afternoons sketching, and nights reading novels in hotel courtyards filled with strangers' laughter. On the last day, I sat at a cafe overlooking the sea. A waiter asked if I wanted my coffee for here or to go. For here, I said, smiling. For once, I'm not rushing anywhere. He nodded, and as I waited, I noticed the faint shimmer of gold on my wrist, my old engagement bracelet. I'd kept it not as a relic, but as a reminder you can rebuild beauty from broken things. I slipped it off, set it on the table, and watched the sunlight catch it one last time. Then I left it there, a quiet offering to the past. When I got home, there was a small envelope in my mailbox with no return address. Inside was a folded piece of paper, that same napkin. The one with our monogram, the crooked D, the memory I'd handed back to him. Except now the D had been scribbled out. Underneath in Isaac's handwriting, one final line. I get it now. I stared at it for a long time, then smiled. Not with bitterness, with peace. Because he was right. He finally did get it. Too late to change anything, but right on time for me to move on. That night I opened my journal and wrote one last entry under his name. He mistook my silence for weakness. But silence, when it's chosen, is power. The kind that doesn't shout. The kind that rebuilds. Then I closed the journal, slid it into a drawer, and turned off the light. Outside the city hummed. Inside, I finally slept without dreams. Because the best revenge isn't revenge